Mother stayed in ancient times for father forever. But father broke his promise of a lifetime of one love, and even mocked mother for having nowhere to go. Who knew that mother returned to her own world on the day he married a concubine of equal status? Not long after, father went mad. My father is the youngest prince of Rome, and not only is he closely related to the emperor in the royal family, but he is also one of the bravest and most handsome men of Rome. Skilled in both martial arts and literary pursuits, he is the top choice for the dream lover of countless young girls in the capital. But he only married my mother as his wife, and never even had a concubine. My mother does not have a prominent family background, nor the beauty to topple empires, nor the virtuous qualities of noble ladies. Father simply loves her. Since I was old enough to understand things, father has always instructed me to never bully mother, never make mother angry, and never disobey mother's orders. Whenever I saw the heartwarming scenes of mother acting coquettishly in father's arms and father lying wearily on mother's lap, pretending to be asleep, I knew mother's absolute position at home, and naturally dared not make mother angry. But mother is very kind, never speaking harshly to me, nor restricting me. While other noble girls were learning chess, calligraphy, painting, and needlework at home, mother took me running and jumping rope to strengthen my physique. She said that the women of the capital pursue a delicate and weak appearance, barely eating a single meal a day, ruining their bodies, and suffering from countless gynecological diseases, all for the sake of men's morbid preferences. In the end, when it comes to childbirth, they either lose their lives or become disabled. And the pitiful ones are still their parents and children. She also rejected father's suggestion to invite a nanny from the palace to teach me, and taught me herself, completely different from the women's virtues and instructions that every noble girl in the capital must read. Mother not only taught me the vast knowledge of thousands of years in the future, but also taught me to shape an independent personality. She said that women in ancient times were already not easy, and needed to rely on their fathers, brothers, husbands, and sons to gain a foothold. Over time, they would easily lose their own thoughts and be completely reduced to victims of patriarchal society. Only by maintaining a clear mind and reason, possessing survival skills and abilities, and grasping one's bottom line, can one survive safely in a corner. Once something happens that violates the bottom line, never try to self-rationalize or give up the bottom line. It was also at this time that I learned about mother's origin, a woman who traveled from the future, willing to stay in ancient times for father. Moreover, mother's era not only had liberated ideas and gender equality, but even marriage was monogamous. Father also showed his sincerity, and even though women from outside flocked to him endlessly, they could not get a single glance from him. However, just as I secretly resolved in my heart to find a man like father in the future, father broke his promise to mother. When I was 8 years old, he told mother that he was going to marry the daughter of the Minister of War as a concubine of equal status. I know Lu Qinghe, the daughter of the Minister of War. It is really because her name is well known in the circle of noble girls in the capital, besides her beautiful and refined appearance and her reputation for being talented. There is also the joke that she is still unmarried at the old age of 25. It's not that no one proposed. In fact, the matchmakers nearly wore down the threshold of the minister's residence. It's just that Lu Qinghe was too proud and infatuated with my father. At her comeuppance ceremony, she declared she would only marry Prince Ding. She waited bitterly for a full 10 years. But my father already had my mother back then, and he turned a blind eye to Lu Qinghe's deep affection. Other women who admired my father married others long ago and had several children. But she cried, made a scene, and threatened to hang herself, preferring to shave her head and become a nun rather than marry. Even when promising young talents like the vice minister of the Ministry of Rights and the gentle and refined Prince Qing sought her hand, they were rejected. Fortunately, she finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. My father did not accept her previous offer to be a concubine but promised her a position as an equal wife. This was the first time I had ever seen him argue and have a cold war with my mother since I had memories. And Jean Yen, haven't I given you enough love and respect over the years? Why don't you even have the heart to take in a pitiful woman? Yes, I promised you one love for life, but I am a roan countryman, a nobleman, not a man from your era. I have doted on you for so many years and given you the honor of being my principal wife. You should be content. I don't know what my father was thinking. He clearly loved my mother so much. Loved her so much that he disregarded his reputation and gave up so many things. Yet in an instant, he overturned the fortress of his vows. Was he tired of her unwavering devotion for 10 years? Or could he no longer bear the ridicule of his colleagues day after day? Or did he feel he owed her something for her unwavering affection? It was impossible to know. From the moment he ignored my mother's feelings, assumed she had nowhere else to go, slammed the door, had a cold war with her, and ordered her to be confined, he was no different from the men in the world. My mother naturally realized this. Without crying or making a fuss, she was very calm. I was very worried and came to accompany her every night. Under the bright moon and starry night, she comforted me instead, her eyes flashing with resilience. After about 7 days, my mother suddenly asked me if I would hate her if she went back. I shook my head, but felt a little sad. Honestly, I didn't want to see my mother become a ruthless matriarch in a domestic power struggle, like the wife of the general next door, who had transformed from a gentle and kind woman. I wanted my mother to be free, but I was also afraid that after my mother left, I would face an impossible situation. But the teaching of self-reliance and self-improvement was deeply rooted in my mind. I couldn't let my mother pay for her life for me. My mother sighed and hugged me tightly. I used to be so critical of women online who couldn't bear to divorce for the sake of our children. But now that it's happening to me, I know what it's like. A few days later, someone from the palace came to invite my mother to the palace. My father had no choice but to release her from confinement. It wasn't until evening that my mother returned. That night, she instructed me again and again. I have handed over all the techniques I have to the emperor. And the empress and I were close friends in our youth. They have promised me that they will definitely take care of you. The time-space tunnel can only allow one person to pass through at a time. The day I leave, after opening the tunnel, I will leave the key for you. Tang tang. Your mother will be waiting for you on the other side. My father thought that after giving my mother 10 years of exclusive affection, she should be content. His unscrupulous probing was just because he thought my mother would be helpless after he left her. But he didn't know that my mother's time-space key could only be activated once every 10 years. 10 years ago, my mother didn't use it, never expecting to use it in the next 10-year period. As the day of my father's wedding with Lu Qinghe approached, he not only never stepped into my mother's courtyard again, but even avoided seeing me, whether it was out of guilt or indifference. My mother had no time to care. She was busy paving the way for me. In the 10 years of marriage with my father, she never, like other women, lived deep in the inner courtyard, content with her family. Instead, she was active in the world of business and accumulated a lot of wealth. She left all of this, along with the confidence she had cultivated, to me. My mother also wrote a letter, telling me to give it to my father when he discovered she was gone. Once everything was ready, she set the date for the night of my father and Lu Qing's wedding. Perhaps only in this way could she leave with a determined heart. My father knew nothing of these things. Immersed in the joy of welcoming his new bride, the night before the wedding, he knocked on my mother's door. Jin Yan, I know you blame me, but rest assured, your place in my heart will always be the most important. Although Qinghe is a cowwife, she has promised me that she will respect you and prioritize you in everything. I promise, after this time, I will never take another woman. My mother ignored his hypocritical plea, instructing her personal maid to open a crack in the window and throw out a jade pendant. It was the token of love my father had given my mother. And the faint sound of the jade breaking on the ground could be heard. My father's desperate pleas were unsuccessful, and he became angry out of shame. What if you still don't agree? In this dynasty, what can you accomplish without me? He felt that my mother had trampled on his dignity, believing that she would find it difficult to move an inch in this back courtyard after losing his favor. But he forgot that his past achievements in supporting the dragon and the current prosperity of the prince's mansion were inseparable from my mother's strategies and plans. After he declared that he would never step into my mother's courtyard again and stormed away, The last trace of attachment in my mother's eyes finally disappeared. The next day, the mansion was decorated with lanterns and streamers. And people came in an endless stream to offer congratulations. Amid the joyous sounds of gongs and drums, Lu Qinghe finally got her wish. I stood in the corner of the wedding hall, glimpsing my father's radiant face from among the crowd. He was dressed in a wedding robe, as handsome and dashing as ever. His eyes filled with smiles and tenderness when he faced the bride. It couldn't help but remind me of the way he used to look at my mother all the time. His gaze was just as gentle. I didn't continue to watch and secretly left. At that moment, my mother had already changed into the clothes she had worn when she first transmigrated, looking at me with loving eyes. Today was indeed an auspicious day. The bright moon hung high, and the courtyard was as bright as day. My father gained a new bride, and my mother gained a new life. A bright beam of light descended from the heavy sky, and my mother stood in the light, forcefully tearing the copper whistle from her neck and throwing it to me. Tang tang. Remember, no one can decide your choices, not even me. If in 10, 20, or 30 years, one day, you are unhappy, then come and fulfill your promise to reunite with your mother. Even after 3 months of mental preparation, at this moment of separation, I couldn't stop the tears from streaming down my face. Scenes of our happy family of 3 flashed through my mind, and an uncontrollable resentment towards my father arose in my heart. After the beam of light dissipated, my mother completely disappeared from this world. Hung Ling embraced me with pity. Young miss, don't blame madam. I choked back tears and shook my head. Perhaps in the eyes of women in this world, it is a common occurrence for a husband to take a concubine or marry a second wife. Some who are less magnanimous become depressed and bedridden, unable to change the prevailing social customs. But from the female empowerment lessons and the descriptions of the world to come that my mother taught me since I was young, I glimpsed my mother's resolute and unyielding soul. One that would rather be a shattered jade than an intact tile. So I will never resent my mother's choice, especially since she left me a way out. I must forge my own path from now on. Just as I put the copper whistle around my neck and tucked it into my collar, a flurry of footsteps suddenly came from the courtyard gate. With a bang, the courtyard gate was kicked open. Under the bright moonlight, my father rushed in, distraught, stumbling as he searched for my mother's figure, calling her name throughout the courtyard, unable to find her anywhere. He saw me sitting on the ground in a daze and hurriedly asked, his voice trembling. He perhaps still held hope that he could stop my mother from leaving. Having dropped his new bride and rushed over at the sight of the beam of light, I coldly told him that my mother had left. His face turned ashen in an instant, and he collapsed to his knees, then looked up to the sky and howled, beating his chest and stamping his feet. At this moment, my father finally experienced the feeling of regret. He thought that by holding on to my mother's lifeline, he could force her to abandon her past vows and reluctantly stay by his side. But he forgot that even if my mother temporarily settled down for the sake of love, she would leave without hesitation because of her husband's straying love and betrayal. She had the confidence to do so, and she taught me and left me with that confidence. So I made no attempt to conceal my contempt for my father, even as he wept bitterly and rolled on the ground, wailing and crying until he passed out. I couldn't muster a shred of sympathy. This was what he deserved. He had only lost a wife whose heart had strayed, and gained another beautiful wife. My mother lost the best 10 years of her life and a loving heart. He lost the one he loved. He deserved it. In the end, it was Lu Qinghe who lifted her veil herself and hurriedly came over, having her dowry matron and maids carry my father back. At first, my father refused to acknowledge her, venting his resentment on her. It's all your fault. Why didn't you marry someone else? Why did you have to fixate on me? It's because you used moral gossip to pressure me, forcing me to promise you a lifetime together. That's why Jin Yan left me. Then, with bloodshot eyes, he heartbreakingly rebuked his mother for being cruel and not loving him enough, for having the heart to abandon him and leave with me. Despite the persuasion of the guests who gradually gathered to watch, he abandoned his usual elegant demeanor, like a heartbroken trapped beast, guarding his position and refusing to let anyone approach. Lu Qing's beautiful eyes were filled with tears. and she swayed unsteadily, wanting to persuade her father to return to his room. But she was brushed aside by her father's raised hand and staggered to the ground. On her wedding night. Being abandoned by her husband and treated like this in front of everyone was an utter humiliation for this typical highborn lady. But she didn't give up, biting her lip and standing up, calling out to San Lang with a broken heart. Showing the extent of her devotion. Seeing that his father was on the verge of madness, I took out the letter left by my mother and handed it to him. His eyes lit up. He snatched it and tore it open, then took 2 steps back, his hands trembling, clutching his chest and crying out in pain. He actually spat out a mouthful of blood. The letter slowly fluttered to the ground, and several large characters were clearly visible in the moonlight. Knowing you have 2 intentions, I come to break off our relationship. From then on, my father went mad. He was sometimes lucid and sometimes dazed. When he was lucid, he would silently stay in my mother's courtyard, constantly flipping through the writings she had left behind, not eating, drinking, or sleeping. When he was dazed, he would blame Lu Qinghe for my mother's departure, using all the nasty words he could think of to scold her, and sometimes even hitting her. And most of the time, my father would choose to get drunk in the pavilion all night long. Lu Qinghe truly lived up to her reputation as a devoted woman who had waited 10 years for my father. Even so, she never abandoned him, unafraid of his violence, nor did she resent his actions. Her watery eyes were filled with love and pity. If my father ignored her, she wouldn't bother him, instructing the maids to take good care of his daily life. When my father cursed and hit her, she didn't make a fuss or resist, only looked at him with tearful eyes, wanting to say something but holding back. When my father was drunk, she would silently help him back to his room, helping him change out of his dirty clothes. Not even frowning when she was vomited on. Her heart was entirely focused on my father, and she extended her love to everything related to him. During the time my father was mad, she not only personally took care of my food, clothing, and daily life but also came to visit me, apologizing to me with guilt. She believed that she was the reason for my mother's departure. Although I was only 8 years old, I could already distinguish between sincerity and hypocrisy. When my mother left, I did uncontrollably resent Lu Qinghe, blaming her for breaking up my family. But under her clear gaze, my resentment dissipated like wisps of smoke. She was completely different from my mother. She was a highly representative lady from a prominent family, conforming to traditional rules and surviving in the cracks of this era. The ideal virtuous wife and loving mother praised in the writings of countless scholars and poets. She was gentle, beautiful, and generous, truly worthy of being the main wife. And my mother had never integrated into this era. She was sober, self-reliant, and independent. Although she restrained her absolutely free behavior for her father's sake, she would never sacrifice her dignity and freedom as a woman to depend on or compromise with any man. At the same time, she was particularly pained by the infighting and competitive behavior among women. Therefore, she never uttered a single complaint about Lu Qinghe, only rebuking her father for his heartless and hypocritical behavior. She even privately advised me not to make things difficult for Lu Qinghe if her character was decent. What virtue or ability did my father possess to win the hearts of these 2 women? Lu Qing's silently dedicated actions finally touched my father's heart half a year later, completing their belated wedding night. From that day on, my father officially declared Lu Qinghe as the only mistress of the manor, and simultaneously sealed off my mother's courtyard, forbidding anyone from approaching or mentioning it. Not only that, he ignored my existence and no longer set foot in my courtyard. Afraid that I would be upset, Lu Qinghe came to comfort me with concern for several days, taking me out for outings, Buddhist rituals, or shopping and entertainment. I was a little sad, but it quickly passed. I knew that my father was erasing the traces of my mother's existence. It seemed that only in this way could he eliminate his resentment towards my mother. Perhaps it wasn't just resentment, but also some remorse and unresolvable pain that surged in the middle of the night, because I had seen him countless times, either staying alone in my mother's courtyard until dawn, or secretly standing silently by my bedside for an hour or 2 before leaving. I suddenly realized that he was afraid to face me. under Lu Qing's persistent and gentle offensive. My father gradually regained his amiable demeanor towards her. It seemed that the madness of half a year ago was just a dream, especially 3 months later, when the doctor diagnosed Lu Qinghe as pregnant. A dazzling joy suddenly burst out in my father's gloomy eyes. He seemed to have another sense of mission and responsibility. Looking at the gently smiling Lu Qinghe, he felt extremely guilty and that he owed her a lot. He remembered her silent dedication, her gentle words, her broad-mindedness, and her unreserved devotion. He was finally able to break free from the pain that my mother had brought him, and he apologized to her. "I'm sorry. I actually overlooked you. I failed Jinyan, and she abandoned me. I can't fail you again." Lu Qinghe burst into tears of joy. She thought that since her father had said this, he truly had her in his heart. She even warmly took my hand and vowed that when her younger brother was born, she would never neglect me and would teach him to cherish his elder sister. But she didn't understand that my father could betray even the vows he made 10 years later. So how could he truly care about a woman raised under strict etiquette? I couldn't bear to refute her fantasy, and I left in silence. Sure enough, 2 months later, my father suddenly brought a woman back to the manor. The woman was beautiful and moving, with a hint of familiar heroic spirit between her eyebrows. Looking at those eyes that were exactly like my mother's, I understood my father's intentions. Lu Qinghe was already showing at this point, and she looked at her father with disbelief as he spoke softly to the woman, showing care and affection. She couldn't help but take 2 steps back while holding her belly, plopping down on a stool. Speechless and stunned, her father frowned at her distraught appearance. "Qinghe, this woman was sent to me by General Zhang, as the mistress of the house. You should arrange and take care of her. Why are you acting like this? Could it be that you're also jealous and don't want to see me enrich my harem?" Lu Qinghe, true to her nature as a daughter that sees her husband as everything, hurriedly shook her head in denial. Fearing that her father would neglect her because of this, she forced a smile and ordered the maid to tidy up a good courtyard for the woman. She also congratulated her father on obtaining a beautiful woman and softly instructed the woman to serve her father well. Only I could see how bitter her smile was, how sour her eyes were. I couldn't bear it any longer and stood up to loudly rebuke my father. "What do you mean by bringing such a woman back? Are you resenting mother? So you found a woman who looks similar to her to humiliate her? Or can't you get over the bump in your heart and found a substitute, thinking it will eliminate your guilt? To those who are good to you, you recklessly enjoy their goodness, and repeatedly stab their hearts. Whether it's mother or Aunt Lu now, you're always like this. No wonder mother would rather leave me than stay with you." Smack! A crisp sound of a slap rang out, and Lu Qinghe screamed and rushed over, looking at my swollen face, tears streaming down instantly. But I didn't cry. I raised my face, which was numb with pain, and looked fearlessly at my father, who was glaring at me. I said, word by word, "I am truly glad that mother left you." My father flew into a rage, grabbed a stick and started hitting me with it, ranting relentlessly. "Ungrateful daughter, my blood flows through your veins. How can you side with others? Have you forgotten that she abandoned you and me? You don't understand me, and you even rebuke me. It was her ideas that disrupted the court that corrupted you. You are not allowed to call her mother again. She is not worthy of being your mother. Your mother is now Lu Qinghe." The powerful whippings came mercilessly. Lu Qinghe hugged me tightly, and most of the blows landed on her back. I roared, telling my father to stop, but he was blinded by anger, threw Lu Qinghe aside, and hit me again. It wasn't until I took out a mended piece of broken jade from my pocket and threw it in front of him that he suddenly stopped. That was the answer my mother gave him when he knocked on her door at night. I had glimpsed it on the desk when I sneaked into my mother's courtyard feeling distressed and hid it in my pocket. It came in handy. Perhaps my father's madness hadn't completely healed. He carefully picked up the broken jade and staggered towards the door. A glimpse of the woman he brought back, with her familiar eyebrows and eyes, made him stop. "Jinyan, is that you? Are you back?" He was extremely excited and wept in panic. "You don't blame me anymore. I knew it. You love me so much. You must be reluctant to leave me. I will be good to you. I will only ever be good to you. Other women mean nothing. He perked up, mistook the woman for his mother, picked her up and rushed out of the yard. I just felt nauseous. The maid's cries pulled me back to reality. I saw Lu Qing's face was like gold paper. Her expression was tragic, and a thick, dark bloodstain was gradually spreading beneath her. I quickly asked Hong Ling to go out and find a doctor. Fortunately, she could ride a horse and quickly brought the doctor back, saving Lu Qing's baby in time. Lu Qinghe was very grateful to me and asked her maid to send me countless treasures. I shook my head and refused. Is her heart not made of flesh? If she hadn't taken the blow for me, how could she have suffered this danger? Moreover, in the past year, her concern for me has been vivid in my mind, not seeming fake, which is truly rare. So, I thanked her solemnly. Her eyes reddened, looking at Lu Qing's pale and weak appearance. I couldn't help but ask, Aunt Lu, father treats you like this. Do you still love him? She curled her lips and a tear slipped from the corner of her eye. San Lang is my lifelong wish. But those eyes were no longer so bright. The next day, after father woke up, he rushed to see how Lu Qinghe was doing. He knelt in front of the bed, remorsefully holding her hand, and bitterly denounced his actions. After only a few words, Lu Qinghe forgave him and sobbed in his arms. Only after hearing father swear never to lay a hand on her again did she reveal a smile. To compensate her, father officially made her the princess consort of the county, and recorded her in the imperial clan's genealogy. Before leaving, he gave me a deep look. The next day, when the pedantic tutor and the strict and dignified governess came to the door, I understood the meaning in his eyes. That was the determination to correct me, to completely abandon his guilt, to transfer his hatred for my mother's refusal to submit onto me, and to force me to submit to this patriarchal system under the guise of etiquette. I began a 6-year struggle. I humbly learned the correct teachings from the tutor, but whenever he mentioned demeaning words about women, I retorted sternly and eloquently, leaving him speechless. And several times he went to father to request his resignation. After learning all the rules taught by the governess, I tore up all the women's virtues and women's instructions she brought and threw them into the fire. I am like father, able to assess the situation and learn to adapt to this era when my strength is still weak, lurking, but I am even more like mother, never allowing the temporary peaceful days to erode my free thinking, and never allowing the patriarchal system under the guise of etiquette to erode my soul. Whenever father wanted to discipline me, Lu Qinghe would dissuade him, so he had no choice but to punish me by kneeling in the ancestral hall. After kneeling a few times, the empress arrived with an edict, inviting him to the palace. When he returned, he looked at me silently for a long time, and finally withdrew my punishment. And from then on, he no longer disciplined me. In the 6 years, Lu Qinghe gave birth to a son and a daughter, firmly establishing her position in the mansion. Father successively took several concubines, all with the charm of the deceased in their eyebrows and temperament. I also made quite a few close female friends, most of whom were unreserved, pure, and kind-hearted girls. As the prince's manor gradually filled with concubines and offspring, Lu Qinghe grew increasingly thin and haggard, especially 1 or 2 restless concubines, who always stirred up conflicts in the backyard, engaging in infighting and deliberately making things difficult for her. Her father only comforted her but never disciplined those concubines, instead spending all his time with them. The concubines, relying on his favor, became increasingly arrogant, especially after becoming pregnant, brazenly challenging the authority of the principal wife, turning the backyard into a chaotic mess. I was angry at her misfortune and pitied her lack of assertiveness, advising her not to be weak and not to care too much about her father's feelings. She no longer resembled the girl from a few years ago, with tears in her eyes, choking back sobs as she said, "If San Lang doesn't love me, what's the point of being the prince's consort?" Instead, she silently stroked the cat in her arms, and after a moment, exhaled a long breath, saying she understood. Another year passed, and I reached my capping ceremony. On the day of my capping ceremony, an imperial edict arrived, bestowing upon me the title of Princess of the Commandery and granting me the honor of entering the palace to accompany the Empress Dowager. In the palace, with the Empress Dowager and Empress Care, everyone treated me with utmost respect. Princess Jingling, the Empress' daughter, was close to my age. A naive and lively girl who always ran to the Empress Dowager's palace to play with me, perhaps feeling that I was different from the other sisters in the palace. Much more straightforward, she became increasingly close to me. Not only did she regard me as a confidant, happy to share interesting things with me, but also, when the Emperor and Empress were not on good terms, she would dejectedly bury herself in my quilt, silently weeping and unwilling to leave, always needing me, her younger cousin by a few months, to hold and comfort her. She was amazed by my calm nature, and then, thinking of my background, her eyes filled with pity and affection. Instead, she would hug me, and the next day, she would throw her worries to the winds. Although our personalities were different, we coincided on certain ideas and shocking actions. It's just that her status was noble, the eldest daughter born to the Empress, showered with love and affection. So when she refuted the tutors, tore up the admonitions for women and lessons for women, and boldly declared that women were no less than men, no one dared to refute her. The Emperor was not displeased, but instead rewarded Jingling with several bushels of East Sea pearls. She sent me a bushel, her eyes full of unrestrained freedom. Tang Tang doesn't know how happy I am to see their faces turn green. When father's health is not good, it is always mother who helps him review the memorials, never taking credit. Even so, the old fogies in the court have impeached her again and again. I really don't understand. Clearly all men in the world have mothers, wives, and daughters. Clearly they cannot live without women. Why do they write books like admonitions for women and lessons for women to oppress women, using countless unwarranted dogmas to bind women, so that all women in the world are confined to the backyard, using women's flesh and blood, tears, to satisfy their self-esteem and desires, yet still hypocritically blaming all unfavorable reasons on women? Men are one thing, but most women in this world think the same way, believing that women are inherently inferior to men, that if they are not loved by their husbands, it is always their own fault, that their lives' pursuit is their husband's affection, trapping themselves in the confines of their small courtyards, never considering whether they can step out of it. Her tone ranged from indignation to lamentation, and then to helplessness. So what if I am a princess? The fate of all women under heaven is bitter. I gently took her hand. Does my cousin know how many women in Dorong envy you? She scoffed. What is there to envy? A wooden cage. A golden cage. What's the difference? I gently shook my head, not saying a word, but I took her to the Empress Dowager to ask for a token to leave the palace. Jingling didn't understand why, but was happy to gain a brief moment of freedom outside the palace. But the carriage, on my orders, did not stop in the bustling city, but drove straight into an alley. 2 years ago, when I went to offer incense with Lu Qinghe, I helped a girl who was hiding under the window of a school listening to the lessons. When she was driven away and scolded by the teacher, she was not convinced. Why do you say that it's useless for women to study? If studying is useless, why do you men still study during the day and at night? Why can I only go home to sew and wash, waiting to marry a good man in the future, while you can sit here? The teacher sneered. Why this? Why that? Why don't you ask heaven why it reincarnated you as a woman? In this world, men are inherently more noble than women. She rolled out of the school covered in mud, and although she didn't say anything more, her eyes contained a strong unwillingness to give in. I couldn't help but approach her, and learned that her name was Hui Myang, and she lived in Tunghua Alley. Since she had sent her younger brother to the school a few times, she had developed a desire to read and write, but her family thought her idea was a fantasy, and all they did was scold and beat her, so I occasionally had someone send her books. It's been 2 years since I last saw her, and I don't know if Hui Myang can compose poems as she said back then. The carriage stopped at the end of the alley, and shouts and cries of pain were coming from inside the low wall. You lowly woman, just because a princess praised you a couple of times, You want to do a man's job. Open your dog eyes and see. Which woman in this world can show her face outside? And which woman can study and take the imperial examinations? Shameless slut. You don't do proper work at home. What good is it to read a few more books? You still have to get married. I don't think we can keep you at home anymore. Abuse and fighting sounds rose and fell. I quickly ordered the guards to break into the house and take Hui Myung, who had fainted on the ground, away. Her father still wanted to stop them, saying that even a princess couldn't break into a private house and take away his daughter. But he was instantly silenced when Jing Ling took out a gold ingot. He even grinned and said that it was Hui Myung's good fortune that we had taken a fancy to her. And from then on she had nothing to do with his family. Hui Myung's injuries were very serious. It seemed she was often beaten by her father at home. Not only had her leg been broken in this latest incident, but her body was covered in a dense patchwork of old and new wounds. Her spirits, however, were good. Knowing she didn't have to go back to that home, she grinned, but her smile soon turned to tears. The neighbors all laugh at me, saying that it's useless for a woman to read so much. In this world, you can't survive without depending on a man. The more they say that, the more I refuse to believe it. Does a woman's ultimate fate have to be marriage? I refuse. She clenched her teeth, her eyes firm. Men don't let us read, simply because they're afraid that once our minds are opened, we'll have the spirit to rebel and pursue things to the end. A seed carelessly sown 2 years ago had actually sprouted in the harsh environment. After settling Hui Myung in, Jing Ling was uncharacteristically silent on the way back to the palace. For 3 days in a row, Jing Ling stayed behind closed doors. On the evening of the 3rd day, just as I was about to go to sleep, a palace maid came to announce the arrival of the eldest princess. She rushed in, grabbed my hand, and her eyes were full of stars. Tang Tang, I think I know what I need to do. Are you willing to help me? I nodded without hesitation. After that night, she became much more steady, but in front of outsiders, she still appeared innocent and naive. We thought of many ways. First, we held a poetry gathering. The noble ladies of the capital all came to attend, drawn by the title of the legitimate princess. But when they heard Jing Ling encouraging them to donate gold, silver, and reputations to jointly establish a girls' school, their faces all changed. What good is it for a woman to read, to run around outside like a man, or to take the imperial examination and become an official? It sounds easy, but don't cause unrest in the family and make the people suffer. Only princesses and commandery princesses have the courage to be so unconventional. They are used to being pampered and don't know our difficulties. As women, we should be content, abide by the rules, and follow traditions. We really came to the wrong place this time. We only hope that our reputations won't be tarnished after the poetry gathering, before the revolution even started. Jing Ling was impeached by the court officials. Even the empress was implicated. Several old ministers were relentless, insisting that the emperor punish the empress for inciting his daughter to defy patriarchal authority and disrespect the husband's authority. They also presented a long list of accusations against the empress, claiming that she had been autocratic and arbitrary in the harem, and had plotted to harm the emperor's concubines and heirs. Jing Ling didn't expect this action to cause such a huge wave. Even the empress dowager was alarmed. No matter how much she doted on Jing Ling, she had to sternly reprimand the two of us. We went to visit the empress, who had been stripped of her authority over the 6 palaces. Unlike what we had imagined, the empress, having removed her gorgeous robes and dressed lightly, leaned against a cushion. The sharp edge of a ruler was no longer condensed between her brows and eyes, but instead, they were stretched out and soft, revealing a peacefulness of time. She didn't scold us, and even comforted Jing Ling, telling her not to worry about her. She was already tired of the harem disputes. Being confined for half a year was actually a good opportunity for her to rest and recuperate. Although Jing Ling was indignant, she understood the stakes. She didn't cry and beg the emperor like she used to, but only talked to me in private. My empress is both talented and beautiful. Every single decree she approved was beneficial to the country and its people, earning universal praise. Just because she is a woman, These courtiers want to suppress her, even though she has contributed to the nation. Tang tang. I am not content. Why must women please men? Why can't women control their own destinies? Why must women be treated like objects, devoid of self-respect? Why must women confine their own or others' behavior according to men's thoughts? Why? Even after such a blow, Jingling and I did not give up. We secretly entrusted Hui Nyang to act as an intermediary and established orphanages among the common people, teaching not only reading and writing but also various skills and abilities to be independent in the world. Although my mother gave me her entire fortune before she passed away, Lu Qing has secretly gathered a lot of gold and silver and gave it to me after she found out about this. My father was always out all night. Seeing her forced smile, I thought of her talent and invited her to be a teacher in the orphanage. She thought for a moment and agreed. The ancients said, "Educate them while they are young." If girls are taught from a young age that they are independent individuals, daring to think and act, and not needing to depend on others, then the fate of those poor women who die depressed or by suicide would surely be different. A year passed quickly. The orphanages gradually gained some reputation among the common people. The first group of orphans who were taken in all reversed their initial listless appearance and were able to face hardships with vigor. Having overcome the first step of fear, it was no longer difficult to go outside the hall to seek a living, as they were able to walk freely through the streets and alleys to seek work, and did it particularly well. The direction of contempt gradually changed with the passage of time. Many women whom the world would not accept began to flock to them. There were baby girls who were thrown away at birth, young ladies who had been well versed in poetry and books whose families had declined and were almost sold off, and embroiderers with unique skills who were almost beaten to death by their husbands. The younger ones became students, and the older ones or those with skills became teachers. Those who had learned enough to go out and make a living were reluctant to leave and would also return to teach the experience of making a living. They twisted into a rope, and over time, they had gathered into a huge force, most notably when others attempted to invade and bully them. They had already resolved the situation before Hui Nyang had time to bring out me and Jingling. I think this should be no different from the women's revolution my mother spoke of. Many things also happened during this year. Lu Qinghe worked as a teacher in the orphanage, escaping the cage of the backyard, and saw many cases of women's suffering. Over time, she remembered that she had insisted on marrying her father at the beginning, not only harming herself, but even if she finally got her wish. This good man had completely changed. Looking back, she even had some regretful emotions. So, the heart that was placed on her father slowly returned to herself. By the time her father noticed the difference, Lu Qinghe had already regarded him as nothing. The Empress, her confinement lifted, kept her palace doors tightly shut, aside from myself and Jingling, who could occasionally visit. Even the Emperor and the Empress Dowager's attendants were turned away. Jingling told me that the Emperor was already overwhelmed by mountains of memorials and disasters across the land. Without the Empress' help, he had fallen from a wise and capable ruler into a mire of incompetence. The imperial court was in chaos, and so was the harem, lacking the Empress' authoritative management. The concubines were embroiled in jealous rivalries and intrigues, their actions and manners without order, stirring up a muddy mess that irritated the Emperor and made the Empress Dowager sigh repeatedly. The Emperor, frustrated, shifted his anger, rebuking the senior officials who had initially impeached the Empress. It was at this moment that a major event occurred in the court. Song Yu, the top scholar of the latest imperial examination, was revealed to be a woman during her first court appearance after the palace examination. Faced with the minister's doubts and the Emperor's anger, Song Yu did not panic. Instead, she calmly removed her official hat and loosened her hair, although her dark hair cascaded down, revealing a bright and beautiful face. She stood tall, her head held high. The minister spoke fiercely, condemning Song Yu for not staying in her place and for attempting to deceive the Emperor. She showed no fear. Song stands in the court today because the Emperor appointed Song as the top scholar. Before this, Song was just a commoner. The long and arduous journey of the imperial examination took 4 years. during which I endured hardship and relied on genuine talent and learning. How could Song be deceiving the emperor? Disguising yourself as a man to obtain fame is deceiving the emperor. Dressing as a man is due to societal prejudice. Song is filled with learning for the sake of the country. Having won over the scholars of the land, how can I not serve in the court? How can I not share the emperor's burdens? And how can I not offer my strength to the prosperity and stability of Rome? Throughout the ages, countless extraordinary women have emerged, serving the country, the ruler, and the people, none of whom have been inferior to men. But the world does not allow it, and after they marry, they fade into the masses, which is a great loss to the country. If you are worried, you need not be. Song already has the heart of a man, no desire for marriage, no intention of gaining fame. Today, I swear before the emperor for all my life, I, Song Yu, will never marry. And my life and death are bound to the Rome kingdom. If I violate this oath, may I be struck by lightning and die a terrible death. However, how could thousands of years of oppressive customs be changed by the mere words of a young woman, amidst the uproar of the ministers? The emperor ordered that Song Ye's official robes be stripped off and that she be thrown into prison. After learning of this, the tightly closed doors of the central palace were resolutely opened, and the empress, adorned in her ceremonial headdress, requested to see the emperor. Just as Jingling and I received Hui Miang's letter and were racking our brains about how to rescue Song Yu, the emperor had already released her. He also brought an imperial decree, temporarily appointing her as an imperial envoy, without a single soldier, to go to Qianzhou to manage the flood. If she succeeded and returned, she could atone for her crime and regain her official status. When we saw Song Yu, she was saying goodbye to Hui Miang at the orphanage. Seeing Jingling and me arrive, Song Yu solemnly bowed, thanking us for our painstaking efforts in establishing the orphanage and begging us to continue our efforts. It is difficult for a woman to make her way in the world, if women themselves look down on themselves. It is truly a tragedy. Song hopes that orphanages can be established throughout Rome, so that women all over the world have a place to live and a place to belong, and understand that women can also be independent, self-reliant, and self-improving. And Song will venture into this secular justice for the women of the world, regardless of success or failure, until death. Before leaving, she asked us to thank the empress. In the sunset, her thin figure gradually faded away, stretched long, very long by the light and shadow, and in the depths of my heart and Jingling's, we could not calm down for a long time. Song Ye's matter was like a stone falling into the lake, rippling a few circles and returning to normal. But there were some changes in the capital, because the women who went out to work from the orphanage were meticulous and skillful. They received a lot of praise in the market, and many shops came to the orphanage to recruit people. Many people were affected by this, and some who were moved began to send their daughters to learn skills. After all, for families who barely have enough food and clothing, religious etiquette is not as important as eating. Therefore, the expansion of the orphanage is imminent. Although Jingling and I were hiding behind the scenes, it was inevitable that people would find out after a long time. But this time, what we received was not impeachment or accusations, but endless donations. There were donations from the Empress Dowager and the Empress, from the noble ladies in the capital, from the unmarried noble daughters, and from the women who could already support themselves in the orphanage. And after the new site was selected, the emperor personally inscribed the plaque Jing Tang Girls' School, and the rewards he gave to Jingling and me in the imperial decree all showed his support and appreciation for this move. It was also a slap in the face to those old ministers who had opposed it before. From then on, Jingling's and my revolution took the first successful step. With the prosperity of the girls' school, the nobles in the capital all followed the trend and established girls' schools in their clans, no longer limited to music, chess, calligraphy, painting, and the female virtue and female precepts, but opened courses in ritual, music, archery, horsemanship, writing, and arithmetic. This trend reached its peak 2 years later when Song Yu successfully returned after controlling the flood. The Qianzhou flood had been a concern for the emperor for many years. Even the ministers who clamored the loudest and were the most qualified in the court could only be restrained in by the local clans and officials protecting each other when they went to control the flood, and returned in defeat. But Song Yu, without spending a single soldier, relied on her silver tongue and the support of the Empress, Jingling, and me behind her, to gradually disintegrate the close interests between the prestigious families, successfully repaired the Qianzhou Dam, and brought back a list of corrupt officials and evidence. The hardships she had endured could be seen from her gaunt appearance, seeing that Song Yu had lived up to her mission. The emperor was overjoyed, not only immediately restoring her official position, but also promoting her rank, rewarding her with countless gifts, and praising her in the imperial decree. Causing a sensation throughout the country, the empress took advantage of this opportunity to ask the emperor for an imperial decree to promote Jingtang Girls' School to the world in the name of the imperial court, although it could not be officially established as an official school. It spread like sparks across the country. Within a few months, private girls' schools sprung up all over the country like mushrooms after rain. As long as a family had some means or their daughter showed some talent, they would all want to send her to a girls' school. And Qianzhou was the second place after the capital to establish a Jingtang Girls' School. When Song Yu went to Qianzhou to take office, she carried with her the Empress' decree and the plaque written by Jingling. Even though we are separated by thousands of mountains and rivers, our hearts are still together. But I forgot that my mother once said that the road of revolution is long and arduous. And even victory is not just for a moment. Although, with our efforts, women have a world different from the past. Compared to men, they still have to spend 100 times more effort and hardship, especially those old ministers. Clinging to outdated ideas and sticking to conventions, they have enjoyed the satisfaction brought by male chauvinism for most of their lives, and when the situation changes slightly, they feel that male power is facing an unprecedented challenge. When the women and their families become more active and start arguing with them, they feel even more alarmed. But the emperor clearly supports Song Yu and Jingling now, and since they cannot persuade the emperor, they want to start with Song Yu and Jingling. Song Yu is just a weak woman with no official background. They sent assassins with knives and guns in turns. But fortunately, she had seen these methods when she was controlling the floods in Qianzhou, and had already hired many experts to protect herself. When this plan failed, they changed to a more vicious plot. Song Yu had sworn in front of them that she would never marry, so they sent all kinds of handsome men to approach her, trying to break her oath. At the same time, they also focused on Jingling, advising the emperor that Princess Jingling was 18 years old and needed to recruit and instigated men from the clan to propose marriage to the princess. When Jingling declared that she would not marry, they all wailed and wept, accusing Jingling of being ambitious and coveting the throne, and knelt in front of the palace gate for a long time. They did not forget me either, secretly saying something to my father. And it was only after the Empress Dowager released me home that I learned that my father had arranged a marriage for me. I naturally refused. But my father was no longer the gentle and refined man I remembered. He was obsessed with finding a substitute for my mother and indulging in wine and women. And his thoughts were no different from those of the old ministers. Immediately, I was placed under house arrest, and he discussed the marriage with the man, speeding up the process. And the wedding would take place in 3 months, when I went on a hunger strike to show my resistance. And after a few days, I met him and begged him. He looked at me faintly, as if seeing my mother through my face. You and Jean Yen are very similar. I couldn't hold on to her, but I can arrange your destiny. Tang Tang. Your father won't hurt you. I looked at the piece of broken jade hanging on his waist and felt only irony. Just when I was at a loss, someone from the palace came to invite me to the palace. My father wanted to decline on the grounds that I was ill, but he didn't expect Lu Qinghe to steal the key and let me out. When I left with the palace servant, I saw my father slap Lu Qinghe. After entering the palace maid led me to the emperor, who sat there majestically, while Jingling lowered her head and eyes. Kneeling on the ground, I quickly knelt beside Jingling, not daring to say a word. Time passed in silence, and I don't know how long it had been, until my legs were numb, when I heard a stern voice from above. I ask you too, Why do you defy your father's decree and refuse to marry? Could it be true, as they say, that you harbor rebellious intentions?" Jingling, neither haughty nor humble, raised her head and answered, "Father, Emperor, please be discerning. Your daughter has absolutely no intention of rebellion. It is simply that I am unwilling to enter a blind marriage and become an unhappy couple with a consort. Wouldn't that betray your good intentions, Father?" The emperor then asked me, "Does Shu Tang think the same?" I raised my head to meet his deep eyes and replied, "Your Majesty, not only do I agree with what Princess Jingling thinks, but I also believe that, as Master Song Yu said, the talents of women should not be confined to a courtyard. Prospering the country and ensuring peace should not only rely on men working hard outside. Women can do the same. It's not that your servants, Jingling and I, are unwilling to marry, but that firstly, we have no one we admire, and secondly, we have ambitions in our hearts. These thoughts and intentions are solely for sharing the burden of the country and the monarch, with no other ideas." The emperor gazed at me for a long time before slowly saying, "You and your mother are exactly alike. I owe your mother a debt, and Derong has also benefited from her gifts." Then, he stood up and turned his back to us. "You always like to compare yourselves to Song Yu. Talking about having ambitions and sharing the burden of the country. But only having a mouth isn't enough. You have to show me results. I'll only give you 2 years. When you're 20, if you don't have the capital to negotiate with me, I will personally bestow a marriage upon you." That night, Jingling and I supported each other back to our palace and stayed awake all night, because of this matter. The marriage arranged for me by my father was cancelled due to the emperor's intervention. He was furious and vented his anger on Lu Qinghe. It was a month later when I heard that Lu Qinghe wanted to divorce my father, although Minister Lu doted on this daughter. He could not understand her actions. Unable to dissuade her, he could only scold her. "You were the one who insisted on this marriage. And now that life is finally getting better, why are you making trouble with the prince? You are a woman. What will you do after a divorce? What about the children? You can't live in the Lu mansion forever, can you? Don't the girls in the family need their reputation?" Lu Qinghe had long been prepared to face the gossip and resolutely moved out of the prince's mansion. She did not return to the minister's mansion either but went directly to live in the Jingtang Women's Academy. She was carrying out her revolution. And so were Jingling and I. The pedantic old ministers were always like grasshoppers in autumn, jumping up and down. They tried every means to trap Jingling and me. And when the Rong tribe from beyond the borders came to court to pay tribute and proposed a marriage alliance, they immediately petitioned the emperor to send Princess Jingling to the Rong tribe for a marriage alliance. How could Jingling sit still and be captured? At the reception banquet, she kicked over the table and sternly questioned the old ministers. "The Rong is far more prosperous than the Rong tribe in terms of national strength. Yet you gentlemen not only lack the demeanor of a great power but also grovel to the Rong tribe. What are your intentions? A poor little tribe dares to covet De Rong's legitimate princess. Are you worthy?" The Rong tribe's envoy's face immediately darkened, and he stormed off. The veteran officials looked as dark as ink when they met the emperor's meaningful gaze and the empress' cold stare. They lowered their heads sheepishly, sitting on pins and needles. Although the Rong tribe was a nomadic group living in barren lands, they were brave and skilled in battle. Their men had tempers like firecrackers, easily ignited. Therefore, after the Rong envoys returned, they used the excuse of Princess Jingling offending the Rong tribe to launch an invasion on the border. And they threatened that if De Rong could send Princess Jingling to the Rong tribe within 3 months, they would shake hands and make peace. The officials in the court were divided into 2 factions, fiercely debating whether or not to send Jingling to the Rong tribe. The pro-peace faction believed that if a single woman could bring friendship between the 2 countries, why bother with causing injury to the bones and wasting money and manpower? The pro-war faction believed that the Rong tribe was acting wildly on De Rong's face. The direct descendant princess status was noble, and marrying her to the Rong tribe was not only improper but also made other countries think that De Rong was afraid of the Rong tribe, further fueling their arrogance. A woman could only buy temporary peace, and only war could solve the problem once and for all. While the two factions were arguing fiercely in front of the palace, Jingling took off her gorgeous clothes, put on riding attire, tied up her hair, and knelt before the throne. The border chaos was caused by Jingling, so it should be ended by Jingling. I beg Father Emperor to send your daughter to Inching to quell the rebellion, and let the Rong dogs open their eyes and see that de Rong's women are never weak, and de Rong's dignity and land can never be trampled on or coveted by them. De Rong has never had a princess married off for peace, and it will not happen now, nor will it ever happen in the future. The pro-peace faction found it ridiculous. The princess is a woman of no account, living in the deep palace for a long time. How could she understand how to wage war? This is not child's play, and we must not delay the affairs of the country. Jingling's voice was firm and powerful. You men are not all born knowing how to fight wars either. Although I do not have brute strength, I understand riding and archery, and I have also read military books. When I was young, I lived with my maternal grandfather on the border and received instruction from him. I am afraid I understand the cruelty of the battlefield better than all the adults present. Since I have already requested the order, it means that I have made a military pledge. Putting life and death aside, if I do not drive the Rong dogs out of de Rong, I swear I will not return to the capital. 3 days later, the Empress and I saw her off at the 10-mile-long pavilion. Although the Emperor granted Jingling's request, he appointed the descendant of a prominent family as the commander-in-chief, only giving her the position of deputy general. When Hui Nyang found out, she packed her luggage and wanted to go with Jingling. She said that although she didn't know how to wield a knife or a spear, she was quick-witted and sharp-tongued, and could help Jingling come up with ideas. At least not let her be isolated and helpless. I'm counting on you for everything in the capital. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, the sky was full of colorful clouds. After the departing team could no longer be seen, I turned around to face the bleak wind. Next, it was time for me to break into my own world. After Hui Nyang left, Lu Qinghe took over as the person in charge of the Jingtang girls' school. The Empress would occasionally call me into the palace to discuss the recent problems encountered by Song Yu or Jingling, and then send trusted aides to deliver letters to the two places. Currently, there are female officials in the court, Song Yu in civil affairs and Jingling in military affairs. Although we are scattered in all directions, I must use my strengths to the fullest, and I must be their backing, helping them succeed in their careers. Therefore, I heeded Lu Qing's advice, studying stewardship mathematics with her, and rummaged through my mother's old courtyard to find many handwritten notes on business management. Officially managing the wealth my mother had left me, a steady stream of wealth came to me and was then sent to Qianzhou and Yincheng, without worries about their livelihood. Song Yu and Jingling could devote themselves wholeheartedly to their endeavors. Whenever natural disasters or man-made calamities occurred throughout de Rong, I would generously donate and ostentatiously send people to provide disaster relief. Over time, I gained a reputation among the people, and the Emperor even bestowed upon me the title of Benevolent Heart Commandery Princess. The awarded jewelry was converted into gold and silver, all of which was invested in the construction of orphanages and girls' schools. After Song Yu had governed Qianzhou with political harmony and Jingling and Hui Nyang had bravely fought against the Rong barbarians on the border for a year, Lu Qinghe finally obtained her divorce papers. On the day I accompanied her back to the prince's mansion to move her belongings, my father was reedied, disheveled, reeking of alcohol, and roaring like a trapped beast. He was both angry and sorrowful, both crying and laughing. Lu Qinghe, I lost Jin Yan to marry you. How dare you treat me like this? Where have I failed you all? You're all leaving me one by one. Qinghe, don't go. From beginning to end, Lu Qinghe never gave my father a single glance. I don't know how she felt inside, but judging from the calmness in her eyes, she probably wasn't heartbroken. When I pretended to be mature and comforted her, saying it was okay to cry if she felt bad, she chuckled and patted my head, saying she was grateful to us for making her realize that the meaning of a woman's life is not limited to the small courtyard of a home. The smile in her eyes made her look gentle and elegant, completely different from the weary appearance she had in the mansion. I can finally understand your mother. Many women's lifelong hope is to marry a good husband, raise children, and support their husband. If the husband's family is successful, they can obtain an imperial decree, enjoying wealth and luxury, and that's the end of their life. But such a life is filled with helplessness, unspeakable bitterness, and how much of it is following one's own heart. I was born into a wealthy family with generations of officials. The education given to women in the family from a young age was to obey their fathers before marriage, their husbands after marriage, and their sons after the death of their husbands. Women should be well behaved and not overstep their bounds. Every single thing, even what clothes to wear, what food to eat, the loudness of the voice, how to sit and walk, has clear rules, not to mention being forbidden to go out usually. Even if unfounded rumors spread in the capital, one would be punished by kneeling in the ancestral hall and copying the precepts for women and the admonitions for women. Looking back now, it's like being a puppet, which is tiresome. And now, I am not afraid of rumors. I no longer have to be manipulated by others. I no longer yearn for the cages they have woven for women. I can do whatever I want, do what I want to do, without any worries. Today, a good husband is no longer what I seek. Now, I yearn for a body as light as a swallow, to fly across the vast world, with nothing to stop me, nothing to hold me back. A phrase my mother once said suddenly surfaced in my mind. Freedom. My mother once said that the greatest tragedy for women in ancient times was the lack of freedom. Their bodies were not free, and their hearts were even less so. Many women awakened, resisted, and were then suppressed by power. But now, Song Yu, Jing Ling, Hui Myung, Lu Qinghe, and I, along with the countless female students in women's schools across the land, are all striving for freedom for women everywhere. No matter how much we achieve, even if it's just a sliver, as long as we open this crack and take the difficult first step, in the future, there will be a second step, a third step, until complete freedom. Perhaps the road ahead is filled with massive boulders and vast thickets of thorns. Or perhaps it's a long and arduous journey that won't be realized until my mother's era. But there's nothing to fear. We cannot stop our steps. In the year agreed upon with the emperor, Jing Ling returned to court in triumph. 2 years of wind and frost had transformed the bright and beautiful girl into a valiant female general, standing tall and proud like a pine tree in the cold snow. In 2 years, Jing Ling had experienced being mocked and sidelined by the main general being killed by the Rong tribe, defending the city in a crisis, and finally using military tactics to drive the Rong tribe out of the Great Rong territory. She even invaded the tribes, reclaiming the grasslands and cities once occupied by her ancestors. The victory of this battle shook the entire country. Not only did the people praise her, but even those nitpicking old officials were silenced. The emperor was overjoyed, not only announcing to the world that Princess Jing Ling's marriage would be decided by him but also bestowing upon her the title of Great Protector Princess, granting her a fiefdom, and igniting a wave of archery and fitness among women in the capital. Under the bright moon and starry sky, Jing Ling and I held hands and looked at each other, laughing and crying at the same time. Hui Myung raised her right hand, missing 2 fingers, and used the remaining 3 to grasp her wine glass, urging us to drink up. Noticing my surprised gaze, Jing Ling said, in a low voice, that in an assassination attempt, Hui Myung had lost 2 fingers while protecting maps and secret letters. Seeing my sadness, Hui Myung smiled nonchalantly and put the wine glass to my lips. Through teary eyes, I also glimpsed the crisscrossing scars on Jing Ling's arm as her sleeves fluttered. Much later, I learned that, for this war, Jing Ling had lost the ability to become a mother. The process of any revolution will not be smooth sailing. Just as we were steadily progressing as planned, an anomaly emerged from Jing Ling's women's school. 5 years had passed since the founding of the orphanage and the women's school. The teaching system was mature, and the teachers were all invited by the Empress and Jing Ling from all over the world, both men and women, all masters of their respective skills. Therefore, many families of minor officials who genuinely intended to educate their daughters were willing to send them to the women's school. This anomaly was the 3rd daughter of the drafter of edicts, named Lin Mian. according to Lu Qinghe. Lin Mian had been seriously ill not long ago, and after recovering, she seemed to have become a different person. She had been studying at the girls' school for about 2 years, was gentle in nature, kind to others, and especially loved to paint. Her paintings were quite artistic and had been praised by many great scholars. But since she recovered from her illness and returned, not only had her temperament changed drastically, becoming sharp and mean, but she also became completely ignorant of painting and never picked up a brush again. During a quarrel with the daughter of the imperial merchant Yuan family, when she used her influence to bully others and was reprimanded by Madame Hui, she stormed back to the Lin residence and never returned to the girls' school. I saw Lin Mian at the flower banquet held by the Empress. When I heard her whisper in surprise about how there could be glasses and glass here, and how there could be cake, I became convinced that she came from my mother's world. The difference was that my mother initially developed these novel things to make herself independent in ancient times, while Lin Mian wanted to use these things to speculate and increase her chances of marrying a noble. In her quiet complaints, I fell into deep doubt. Mother, she clearly came from your world. So why are her thoughts contrary to the female empowerment you talked about? Even in that free era thousands of years later, there are still women who seek to please men and marry into noble families as their lifelong pursuit. Is the hardship and effort we are putting in now really worth it? My wavering belief made me uneasy. So I sent people to secretly watch Lin Mian. Her every move was reported to me like a swallow delivering letters. For example, she asked her maids to inquire about the princes and marquises, waiting for a chance encounter on their usual routes. For example, she schemed with her sisters at home and competed for attention in front of her parents, all for a good marriage. Also, for example, she declared inside and outside the house that women only need to marry well, and why should they have to show their faces outside and work so hard? They only need to please their husbands and enjoy wealth and glory. Not an ancient person, but better than one. In the 5 years, not every woman who came out of Jing Tang girls' school was like Song Yu and Jing Ling, unwilling to marry. Most of them also found good husbands, but with a free mind. They had a clear head and bright eyes. Even if they met the wrong person, they would not be confined to that courtyard and would find a way out. Although my heart was heavy, I respected her choice and destiny. Thinking again of the sacrifices made by Song Yu, Jing Ling, and Madame Hui, and the efforts of everyone, the wavering original intention instantly became like a Dinghai Shenzhen, stable and immovable. We may not be able to change all women, but changing even a part of them is already a different world. However, I underestimated Lin Mian's ambition. After I withdrew the surveillance on her, she turned her attention to the 14-year-old second prince. She not only had a secret affair with the second prince, but also instigated him to plot for the throne. Women from that world have a different charm from ancient women. The second prince was so fascinated by her disguised face that he not only listened to her advice but also regarded her as a lifelong confidant. As a result, incidents of people falling into the water in the harem occurred frequently. Some concubines were so frightened that they miscarried, and a young prince died because he was not rescued in time. By the time I realized that Lin Mian and the second prince were working together behind the scenes, they had already aimed their cannons at Jing Ling. Since Jing Ling was honored as the protector princess of the nation, her deeds with Song Yu have been widely circulated among the people, and have even been compiled into stories by storytellers, sung in the streets and alleys, and even had a temple built for her. It can be said that she is famous all over the world and deeply loved by the people. Moreover, Jing Ling is a princess born of the empress, and the emperor has few children. The third prince is only 7 years old. The fourth prince is still in his infancy, and the other young princesses are not worth mentioning. Lin Mian believes that Jing Ling's power is strong and that she has signs of conflict with the second prince. She suggested that the second prince strike first. As a result, a disabled soldier came to the border, knocking on a drum to file a complaint against the protector princess of the nation, accusing her of using unscrupulous means to establish military merits, killing the main general and blaming the Rong tribe, robbing others of their military merits, and colluding with the Rong tribe to betray the country. He also presented a letter written by Jing Ling to the Khan of the Rong tribe, The letter not only contained unsightly and obscene words, but also how she had traded with the Khan, allowing him to retreat thousands of miles, waiting to be repaid twice after ascending the throne. Although this plan is clumsy and easy to see through with a little thought, it is undeniably vicious. The first is to pull Jing Ling down from the altar with scandalous affairs, shattering her noble qualities and image. The second is to completely overturn Jing Ling's military merits, implying that she used her body and treason to make deals, and that she also coveted the throne. Everything she had done before could be used to accuse her of being greedy for power and authority. Although Jing Ling was not imprisoned, she was stripped of her title and confined to the prince's mansion, heavily guarded. The empress pleaded for her, taking off her hairpin and disheveling her hair, kneeling in front of the palace for 3 days without getting up. Not only did she not see the emperor, but she also received a punishment of 3 months of confinement. I wanted to enter the palace, but I was stopped by the palace staff. And I also received a letter from Hui Nyang, asking me not to act rashly. A few days later, news spread from the palace that the emperor, while arguing with the empress over Princess Jing Ling's matter, became angry and vomited blood, falling into a coma and never waking up. Those old ministers, seeing the wind, eagerly recommended the second prince to take charge of the affairs of the court. As soon as the second prince took power, the first thing he did was to shut down Jing Tang Women's School, eliminate dissidents, and summon Song Yu to the capital. Lien Mian believed that becoming a prince's consort was a sure thing. Noble ladies rushed to curry favor with her. She became more and more arrogant, began to call herself the second prince's fiancée, and frequently entered and left the prince's mansion. She even argued with a group of concubines in the prince's mansion, scolding and beating them at every turn. When she heard that a concubine was pregnant, she fed her safflower, causing her to miscarry and be infertile for life. However, the second prince relied on her, not only not blaming her, but also treating her like a treasure. From then on, she became even more unscrupulous. As soon as she heard any rumors that a good woman was close to the second prince, or admired him, that woman would suffer the next day. In just half a month, the noble women in the capital were panic-stricken. At this time, Song Yu had arrived in the capital. I rushed to see her, only to find her haggard. Before I could exchange more than a few words of greeting, she was hurriedly summoned away by someone from the palace. When news came from the palace that she had violated her oath and was 2 months pregnant, the second prince had already stripped her of her official robes and exiled her on a selected day. I felt an unspeakable panic and immediately got up to find Lin Mian. Lin Mian didn't take me seriously, leaning lazily on the couch, pretending to doze off. Kind-hearted Princess Renqin, I know why you've come, but I can't help you. Who told you to not enjoy your prosperity and wealth and instead grow covered in lice, jumping around? For the second prince's grand plan, we can only sacrifice you. You should be thanking me for letting the second prince spare you. Women, be content and dutiful, marry and have children, and take good care of your own home. Isn't that good enough? I asked the question that had lingered in my mind for a long time. Aren't you a modern person? Why do you still have these kinds of ideas? She suddenly opened her eyes, not expecting me to know her origin, but the alert look quickly turned into endless mockery. So what if I'm a modern person? No one says modern women can't rely on men. It's you people, a few ancient women, daring to start a women's revolution in a feudal dynasty. It's utterly ridiculous. Do you think that just by relying on you few, the prejudice of male superiority that has existed for thousands of years will disappear? Do you think that if women are liberated and free, life will be better? Only fools think they can live a good life by relying on their own hands and labor, not knowing that whether in ancient times or modern times, the rules of the world are always that the weak depend on the strong. Why not follow the trends of the times? Why do you have to go against the tide? I looked at her face, clouded by greed, and shook my head. Lin Mian, it's your freedom to pursue luxury and unearned gains, but you are a modern soul. You have enjoyed the education and environment of female independence and autonomy, yet you still don't understand the true meaning of revolution. Even if prejudice cannot be eliminated, even if there are still women like you thousands of years later, even if Song Yu, Jingling, and I will end up tragically, as long as we can give women the opportunity to choose, the space to improve, and the idea that it's not too late to repent and start over even if we lose our lives. We will do it without hesitation, and we will be happy to do so." Looking at her complicated expression, I turned and strode away. I spent a lot of money to be able to see Song Yu. Fortunately, although her face was sallow, her spirits were still good. I asked her how she became pregnant, but she smiled faintly and asked how Jingling and I were doing. The princess residence was heavily guarded. Not even a fly could get in. The only thing I could confirm was that the message from Huinyang confirmed she was safe and sound. As for me, since the last negotiation with Lin Mian, the second prince began to suppress my business, using all sorts of despicable methods. I had to temporarily suspend operations to avoid it. Seeing my heavy expression, Song Yu gently held my hand, just like I held Jingling's hand back then, gently and firmly. "Have you forgotten? A single spark can start a prairie fire." Having returned home, Huinyang was waiting for me in the mansion. After seeing her off, I immediately wrote a letter, imploring Lu Qinghe to find a way to send it to the Empress Dowager in the palace. She readily agreed and carefully put away the letter. The next day, Madame Lu entered the palace to pay her respects, under the pretext of visiting the imperial concubine Lu, who came from the Lu family. A few days later, I heard that Lin Mian had offended the Empress Dowager in the palace and was punished with 20 slaps and forbidden from entering the palace. At the same time, Huinyang, carrying the token Song Yu had given me in prison, rushed to Ganzhou on horseback. I, on the other hand, claimed to be ill and did not go out. In the dead of night, I took the package that Lu Qinghe had prepared, plunged into the dark night, braving wind, frost, rain, and snow, and galloped all the way to Yincheng. A month later, it was the day of Song Yu's exile. Huinyang and I met at the city gate, each followed by hundreds of women, all travel-worn and with solemn expressions. Time was of the essence, and we had no time for greetings. We rushed to the Dengguan drum court, and the sound of the grievance drums startled all the civil and military officials and the people of the capital. Anyone who beats the drum to appeal for grievances must be beaten with 20 strokes before stating their case. Huinyang took the lead and stepped forward. When she presented the bloody petition of 10,000 people from Ganzhou, and the 100 women from Ganzhou who volunteered to come to the capital to appeal for Song Yu wept bitterly. Everyone present was moved and knelt down, demanding that the matter be reported to the imperial palace and that the emperor re-examine the case after waking up. Some, with more intense emotions, shouted that Lord Song was a good official, and getting married and having children did not affect her work. The emperor was magnanimous and would at most restore Lord Song to her commoner status and would never sentence her to exile. Was it the second prince's selfishness at play? At this moment, I stepped forward and beat the grievance drum again, when I loudly accused the second prince of treason and colluding with the enemy, fabricating evidence to slander the protector princess, and plotting to harm the emperor. The tightly closed palace gate finally slowly opened. I saw the second prince standing at the gate, his face ashen, waving his hand, and several guards behind him drew their swords and rushed forward. The onlookers screamed and dispersed, but we stood firm. Just as the swords were raised above our heads and about to fall, a majestic voice came from the palace gate. "Stop." It was the Empress Dowager. Seeing this, the second prince had no choice but to grit his teeth, put on a harmless face, and righteously denounced me for turning black into white and slandering him, and Huinyang and these women for challenging imperial authority and disregarding their lives. The Empress Dowager stared at him for a long time, until his legs trembled and he was covered in cold sweat. Before coldly speaking, Consort Qin had the heart of a wolf and poisoned the emperor's medicine. Just now, I have had her arrested and sent her a cup of poisoned wine to end her sins. You can go now and perhaps see her one last time." The second prince, upon hearing this, cried out in sorrow, "Mother consort." After all, he was only a 14-year-old boy, and he immediately lost his composure, his eyes bloodshot. Relying on the fact that he was surrounded by trusted guards, he pointed at the Empress Dowager and roared, issuing an order. Kill this old hag and all of them for me. He may have already planned to seize power in the near future. With one order, thousands of soldiers suddenly surrounded the inner and outer city of the imperial capital, holding knives and guns and coming menacingly. The Empress Dowager clearly hadn't anticipated that the second prince would be so audacious, attempting to assassinate his grandmother and cousin in broad daylight, and was greatly alarmed. At that critical moment, the sound of horses' hooves rose and fell, approaching rapidly, and then they charged into the rebels' encirclement. I only heard the excited shouts of the 100 women behind me. The great princess protector of the nation, Princess Jingling, seeing Jingling unharmed, leading a vast army of soldiers like a divine being descended from the heavens. The second prince instantly panicked, and within a few moves, he showed signs of defeat. Before long, all the rebel soldiers were captured. When they entered the palace, the emperor had already awakened, and the empress was sitting by his bed, serving him medicine. Seeing the dispirited and powerless second prince, he was furious, smashed the bowl of medicine at his head, and then demoted him to a commoner and imprisoned him for life. When he heard that hundreds of women who had voluntarily come from Qianzhou and Yinsheng were kneeling outside the palace, petitioning to testify, the emperor took a deep look at Jingling and me, and ordered the palace attendants to summon them into the hall. Although the women were in awe of the emperor's presence, they were neither humble nor arrogant, and explained in detail Song Ye's practical deeds and achievements in Qianzhou, and Jingling's blood, sweat, and tears in Yinsheng, as well as the conspiracy of the remnants. When he saw the blood letter of 10,000 people's petition, the emperor immediately ordered people to quickly recall Song Yu. Fortunately, the exile team had only traveled to the outskirts of the city, and before long, Song Yu was kneeling before the hall. The 100 women from Qianzhou couldn't help but redden their eyes when they saw her emaciated figure, and Song Yu, seeing these familiar faces, couldn't help but tear up as well. When the emperor asked her about the whole story, she didn't say anything, but simply bowed. She said, "It is true that I violated my oath, and I am willing to accept punishment." The 100 women from Qianzhou cried and kowtowed incessantly, begging the emperor to be lenient. The emperor only asked one question: who is the father of the child? Song Yu was stunned for a moment. Her eyes dimmed, and she slowly shook her head. It wasn't until we supported each other out of the palace gate and saw Hui Nyang running over with tears in her eyes that we realized we had survived a deadly situation. With the truth revealed, Jingling had her grievances redressed, and her title of Great Princess Protector of the Nation was restored, and she was also granted a fiefdom to show appeasement. As for Song Yu, the emperor did not exile her, nor did he dismiss her from office. But when he learned that the father of the child had passed away, he pondered. Song Qing is diligent and pragmatic, and has made great contributions. She is a rare talent for governing the world. If we were to let 10,000 people lose a good official who supports and loves them, and let the court lose a capable minister who can manage the country and govern the world, because of a harsh oath, it would be too regrettable. A woman's ability to conceive is a gift from heaven, and I cannot go against the will of heaven. So I will fine you 2 years' salary and demote you by 1 rank. Immediately afterward, a law was promulgated. All women over the age of 20, regardless of whether they are married or not, can independently form a female household. This law shook the whole country, and countless women were moved to tears and cheered. The next day, Lu Qinghe got up early and waited outside the yamen. After receiving the household registration paper with her name on it, she invited Jingling, Song Yu, Hui Nyang, and me to gather together and drink and chat. During the banquet, we all toasted Song Yu. Lord Song, thanks to you, we have been able to push our revolution a big step forward. Song Yu chuckled, gently caressing her lower abdomen. It wasn't until after my daughter was born that I learned this unexpected child was also the second prince's doing. But the child's father had truly fallen in love with Song Yu during their interactions. That's why he selflessly took a knife for her when she was in danger. I don't know if Song Yu loved him, but what I'm sure of is that this shockingly extraordinary woman would never let love hinder her progress. After the second prince lost power, The court scribe was targeted because of Lin Mian, and his family was seized. Lin Mian, as the instigator, couldn't escape the death penalty. The day before her execution, I went to see her in prison. She was disheveled, like a madwoman. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. I'm a transmigrator. I should be the empress. I'm a modern person. How could I not be able to beat these ancient people? Damn it. That good-for-nothing second prince. I must have bet on the wrong horse. When she saw me, Lin Mian pounced over like a vicious tiger, trying to grab me through the bars. Tong Shutong. Don't you all be so smug. Do you think your revolution has succeeded? Do you think you can be remembered in history? I'm telling you, these men are all using you. What do women mean to them? How could they possibly respect women or think highly of you? Women will never, ever be able to defeat men. And men will never look at women differently. Trying to fight for women's rights in a patriarchal society is wishful thinking. A pipe dream. Ha 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 ha. I simply instructed the jailer to present her with a lavish dinner and turned to leave. After this incident, the emperor's health deteriorated further. He was already physically weak, and consort Qin and the second prince poisoned him with the intent to kill, which left behind many after effects. Within 2 years, the emperor was often bedridden, unable to attend court. The empress acted as regent, and during occasional moments of lucidity, he would summon Jingling to teach her how to review memorials. I vaguely sensed something was coming. The civil and military officials were even more perceptive than I was. Yet no one dared to discuss it. A year later, on a day when the emperor was in relatively good spirits, he secretly summoned Song Yu, Jingling, and several important officials into the hall. When the hall doors opened, a palace servant held up an imperial decree to announce to the world that from that day forward, women could also participate in the imperial examinations, taking the same exams as men in separate halls. Those who passed the examinations could enter the court as officials. In the same year, countless women flocked to examination halls across the country. After multiple rounds of examinations, 26 women finally passed and obtained official positions. Most of them came from Jing Tang Women's Academy, and the Protectorate Princess and I once again became famous. By the time I was 27, the emperor's condition fluctuated. Jingling acted as regent. At first, some veteran officials vehemently opposed it. However, Jingling handled political affairs with ease. After a year of her governing, the weather was favorable and the people were at peace. Only then did the opposition cease, and they willingly submitted. I would privately advise Jingling from time to time not to be too busy and to consider her own life and marriage. She would smile and tease me instead, saying that Princess Renxin was hard-hearted and that Vice Minister Zhong had been waiting for 4 years but still couldn't get her to agree to marry him. It wasn't until the day Huanyang told me that Jingling had been injured in the Battle of Yinsheng and could no longer bear children that I understood the magnitude of her sacrifice. My father, growing older, one day encountered Lu Qinghe on the street and, seeing her even more beautiful and moving than she was in the mansion, suddenly recalled all her good qualities. He then began to stand guard at the entrance of the Lu residence every day, calling out with deep affection, more persistent than a dog. In the end, it was the few female students taught by Lu Qinghe who couldn't bear it and chased him away, throwing stones. Another year passed, and the world was at peace. Women in the court now had the right to speak at the table. Faced with Minister Zhong's 5th marriage proposal, I did not refuse but made a request. I want to go see a place. If I haven't returned after a year, then marry someone else. That night, a beam of light suddenly descended upon the night sky of the princess mansion, disappearing after a moment. Extra. Jingling's story. I am the most honored princess of Darong. Not only the eldest daughter but also descended from the direct line of the empress. Therefore, no one in the palace disrespects me, and all my elders dote on me. But I didn't feel joyful. I always thought of my childhood when the bright moon was high, of the wind whistling past my ears as I rode horses and played at my maternal grandparents' home at the border. My maternal grandfather is the general guarding the southern pass, and my maternal grandmother came from a scholarly family. Therefore, my empress mother is excellent in both etiquette and archery. I heard from the granny beside my mother that the emperor greatly favored her. Otherwise, he would not have overcome opposition while still a crown prince and personally chosen her as his crown princess. I was skeptical about this statement, believing it was the granny humor ing me, because, before the age of 8, I always saw my mother refusing the emperor at the door, and the emperor leaving with a cold face. And at my second younger brother's first birthday banquet, when my mother was accused of plotting against consort Qin, and I was said by the Imperial Observatory to have offended my second younger brother, the emperor did not speak up for us either. That year, my mother was deprived of her authority over the 6 palaces for the first time. After that, the authority over the 6 palaces was like a kite let loose, repeatedly flying into the hands of other concubines, only to return to my mother before long. The emperor then sent me to my maternal grandparents' home at the southern pass. Although I was neglected and lost favor, I spent the happiest 3 years there. Although the southern pass was occasionally invaded by foreign tribes and was not as lively and peaceful as the capital, I did not have to abide by palace rules, observe etiquette, or care about my image. I could freely roam the mountains and rivers, sing loudly and unrestrainedly, and gallop on horseback at will. At the southern pass, I could be a fledgling eagle boldly trying its wings, soaring straight into the clouds. In the palace, I was a bird confined in a golden cage, forever looking up at that sky. Therefore, when I was brought back to the palace and faced with the pedantic words of female etiquette from the tutors, I felt endless revulsion. Why should women only take marriage and vying for favor as their lifelong pursuits? Why should women be bound by so many constraints? Why don't women even have the freedom to go out and choose? Why can't women establish careers and run their own families like men? Why? Until Tang Tang came to the palace. She pointed the way out of my confusion. If she ignited my spark, then Hui Nyang, Song Yu, and Madame Qinghe were the spring breeze that returns. After the second prince's rebellion ended, father's health deteriorated. Mother often stayed by his bedside, and the two of them no longer seemed like the adversaries they were in their youth. Though they didn't speak much, I could always feel the warmth between them when I came to pay my respects. In my 30th year, father was nearing his end. He called me to his bedside alone and looked at me intently for a long time. I thought of the anxious mother outside the door, and looking at the emaciated father on the bed, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. I knew what he wanted to say. Father, rest assured, the throne of Derong will forever bear the name of Tong. He seemed finally relieved and asked me to call mother in. At that time, the third prince was 17, and the officials at court had their own agendas, beginning to divide into 2 factions, competing secretly. But the third prince was a lazy man, only wanting to live a leisurely life of teasing birds and walking dogs. When officials secretly approached him, he rushed to the princess' mansion that very night, grasped my hand, and said earnestly, "Royal sister, my good royal sister, you are a talent for governing the country. I don't understand anything. How dare I covet this position? Wouldn't that be harming people? Those old, pedantic things. Now women can be officials, and do even better than men. Why can't women be emperors? But spare me. Just let your younger brother cling to your thigh." In fact, I had been secretly watching him for several years, and it was indeed as he said, a wanderer with no interest in state affairs. So I let him change direction and work hard to have some good children. 7 days later, father died, and mother's hair turned white overnight. When the bells of the enthronement ceremony rang, my gaze swept across the faces of the civil and military officials, seeing the female officials' expressions of shared glory, seeing the male officials' reverent and fearful eyes, step by step, steadily walking toward the supreme position. Extra. Shu Tang's story after the light beam dispersed. I saw my mother again. Although she was over 50, she still had the gentle look I remembered. After returning from ancient times, she did not remarry. Seeing me arrive, she was not surprised, but hugged me with tears in her eyes, and then explained the differences between modern and ancient life to me, teaching me how to use modern high-tech items. 3 months later, I was finally able to adapt to this era. I also discovered that at the age of 28, I could be considered a middle-aged woman in ancient times. An unmarried middle-aged woman was even rarer, but it was different in modern times. There were many women who hadn't entered marriage at the age of 28. They were active in all walks of life, had independent and autonomous thoughts, had youthful vitality, and had a passion for life with unlimited expectations. Before long, I integrated into these women. When I saw historical dramas playing on TV, I couldn't help but ask my mother, according to historical records, what ultimately happened to Darong. My mother smiled and shook her head, saying that the history of Darong had not yet been unearthed, and in the development of the long river of history, only the descendants of Darong had some fragmentary records. During the summer vacation, my mother took me around the country, and I would visit museums and national history museums in every place. When I came to a historical museum of the Republican Revolution, I was carefully learning about the revolutionary history of this era when a crisp child's voice suddenly came from the side. Life is precious. Love is of greater value. But for freedom, both can be thrown away. Mom, what does that mean? The loving woman crouched down and answered softly. This is the sacrifice made by the revolutionary martyrs who shed their blood and gave up their lives and love for our current free life. Suddenly, the image of Huanyang with broken fingers, Jingling who could not bear children, and the tenacious song You appeared in my mind. In the year in modern times, I eagerly absorbed practical technical knowledge and analyzed the national system. Although I don't know why I did this, my heart always guided me to learn. One day, when my mother and I were watching the news, a piece of archaeological news was suddenly broadcast. At 9:00 a.m. today, archaeological experts discovered an ancient royal tomb in Village X, City A. After surveying the epitaph, they found that it recorded a dynasty missing in history, the Darong dynasty. The tomb owner was a princess of this dynasty. The epitaph records the princess' great achievements in assisting the current empress in governing the world, affirming the existence and achievements of the Darong dynasty empress, and also allowing us to see that the status of women in Darong at that time was not lower than that of men. My mother seemed to feel something, gently stroked my face, and looked at me deeply with nostalgic eyes. Then patted my shoulder. Go ahead. The familiar beam of light enveloped me, and I walked in with a belly full of new knowledge. When I opened my eyes, I saw Jingling in a yellow robe, majestic and awe-inspiring, Guanyang who had become a female official, Song Yu leading her daughter to experience the people's conditions, Lu Qinghe preparing lessons by candlelight, and servant Zhong waiting in place.